Okay, in this video we're going to go ahead and create an enemy class, and if I run this, I'll show you where we're going with this. I'm just creating a circle, and that's going to be my enemy for right now, but the key thing is that it's moving, and it has a location vector which places it on the canvas. It also has a velocity which is moving, and each frame is going to move according to whatever the velocity is. Obviously, the greater velocity, the further it's going to move. And then finally it has an acceleration vector, and that vector is going to change the direction. And so we can think of velocity as changing the location. When I change the velocity with acceleration, that's going to be able to steer. We're going to use acceleration to steer our enemies in whatever direction we want. So to begin this, again, I'm going to go ahead and launch these from the center, and each time I run this, all of my enemies will launch out from the center, but we can see them bouncing around. Okay, let's go ahead and look into the code. First thing I need to do is I need to create an enemy class. And so to do that, I've already gone into saved a file here, and notice it's inside, well, you can't see that. Let's see, I've got to go into my index.html, and I want to make sure that I've got this guy called JSVec. So that's my new vector file. So since I'm using JSVector elsewhere, I don't want to get rid of that, but I'll go ahead and take JSVec, and I will save him. And the other thing I want to do is I want to add my enemy file that I just created. And so I'll come in here and I'll say enemy.js. Okay, good. So now I've got all my JavaScript files linked, and so I want to create this guy. I think I'll come into my bullet class, and I'm just going to simply grab all of this information here, and I'm going to paste it in and keep what I need and discard the rest. So let's go ahead and call this enemy. And the only thing I'm going to be passing in initially is a location, but I can also get rid of all of these things. And let's get rid of run's going to stay the same. Update is going to change. Render is going to change. And so I'll go ahead and do that. Let's call this enemy class. Okay, good. So now how do I create the render? What am I going to render? Instead of rendering images, now I'm going to be rendering little balls. And so let's go ahead and just paste this code in here, and so let's see what's going on. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a context. And so I go to my global variable tower game, I grab the context from inside tower game, and I set that equal to a local variable context, or CTX for context, and I use begin path and arc. These are both context methods. They're going to allow me to draw an arc onto the screen at location, this.x and this.y, and there's going to be a radius. I better put a radius in here, so let's go ahead and take this guy, put him up here, and say this.radius is equal to, I don't know, let's say 10 pixels, little tiny balls in this case, and it's going to go from math to pi. So I can draw a 45-degree arc, or a 90-degree arc, or a 180. This is going to be math pi, which is 180 degrees, or math pi radians, times 2. That's going to give me 2 pi radians, which is equal to 360 degrees. In other words, a complete circle. And I'm going to give it a stroke style. That RGB is going to be 000, which is black. And then I need this dot color, so I'll come back up here and put this dot color up here, and this is going to be, let's see, I think I'll do RGBA, and RGBA is going to have 3 values. So let's say 200, 200, 200, and the fourth parameter, so this is red, green, blue, alpha. The fourth parameter is alpha, and I'll just make that 0.5, and so that's good to go. So now the fill style is going to be sort of whitish gray and semi-transparent, and it'll have a black outline. That's what stroke style and stroke do. Fill style and fill, those work together. I think that's good to go. Okay, update is really simple. All I need to do is create this.vel for velocity, and I'm going to set that equal to a new JSVec, and I have to give it some values. So let's go ahead and say I'm going to choose a random x and a random y. So I'm going to say math.random, and that's going to give me a number between 0 and 1. I'm going to multiply that by 6 and subtract 3, and that's going to give me an x coordinate. And so I'll do the same thing for my y coordinate, copy this and paste it over. So you can think of this as kind of giving you a percentage, some number between 0 and 1, and if I multiply that by 6, let's say I get something close to 1, So 6 minus 3 is equal to 3. And if I get something close to 0, 0 minus 3 is equal to negative 3. So it'll give me a random number between negative 3 and positive 3 for both my x and my y coordinate. The main thing is each individual enemy object is going to have its own velocity. They're all going to start off in the same location, but they'll have different velocities. They'll all have a radius 10. They'll all have the same color, and that's good to go. And the only thing I need to do to update now is I need to take loc, which is my location vector, and I'm simply going to add, that's one of the methods that I created inside of my JSVec class, and I'm going to add velocity. So I'm going to take velocity, add that to location, and I think that's good to go. Okay, now I'm going to come back to my game class, and inside of my constructor, so this is my game class, this is the constructor of the game class, and I want to create another method in here. I'm going to say this dot load enemies, and that's good to go. So load enemies is ready to go. I need to write that method. Excuse me. And so let's do that down here. Load enemies, and load enemies is going to probably take in a number. Let's say I'm going to take 3. I want to make 3 enemies. So I'll take that guy in here as a parameter. Let's just say num. And so in my for loop, all I have to do is say for. And I'm going to say, let's say let I is equal to 0, and I is less than num, and I plus plus. And so I'm going to create an enemy. So let's do that. I'm going to say var, and I'm going to say E is equal to new enemy, and I want to give it a location, and I could put that all inside the parameters. Let's just go ahead and say loc, and I'll create a local variable called loc. I'll say var loc for location is equal to new, and I'll say JSVec, and this guy is going to be a new vector. And so where should I put it? Let's go ahead and say this dot canvas dot width. So I know the width of this canvas, I'm going to divide that by 2. That's going to be its x location, and I'll take the same value, except I'll change width to height, and that will give me the y location. And I'm going to go ahead and take this variable, I'm going to send it into my enemy when I create a new enemy. Now all I need to do is push this in and say this dot enemies. I do have an enemies array already established, and I'm going to say dot push just like I did before, and I'm going to push in E, and I think that's good to go. And then all I'm going to need to do is when I render these guys, so I've already rendered towers and bullets, I'm going to render enemies in exactly the same way. So enemies now is going to have a bunch of enemies, in this case 3, enemies, good. And so I'm going to take that guy, and now I'm going to render each of the enemies in that array. Wow, I think that's it. Let's go ahead and see if this runs. I'll probably get some errors, but let's go ahead and try it. So I'll just go ahead over here and say Control O, and I'll go into here and say run, and I'm not seeing enemies. Oh, by the way, I took away, that's another thing I want to mention, I took away the background image. So let's go ahead and see what I did there. If I go to CSS styles, down in my canvas div, I made the background black, and I just commented out the background image. So the background image is not showing up right now. The background is black. But I notice that I'm not getting anything. So let's go ahead and say Control-Shift-I. It says I have an error. It says loc is not defined, and so that's obvious. I did not use this. So let's go ahead back up into my game class right here, and I'm sorry, in my enemy class, I guess. And so I've got this dot loc and this dot velocity, and so I need those two guys. So let's go ahead and see what happens now. And there they go. Look at that. I've got 3 little guys moving around, and they are moving. So that's working fine. Okay, let's just go ahead and make a quick change here. Instead of doing 3, let's do, I don't know, let's do 333, and now I should just go ahead and see when I run this, 333 balls moving out. I'm not going to count those, I'm just going to trust that that is 333 balls. They've got a random they're all starting off in the same location, but they have a random velocity. So you can see them moving in different directions. They're semi-transparent, and that's good to go. All right. So now I'm going to add another vector, and this vector is going to be my velocity vector. I'm sorry, this is going to be my acceleration vector. And so the way that I do acceleration is I'm going to say this dot ACC is equal to, and I'm going to say new JSVec again. And now I'm going to add velocity to acceleration. So for velocity, I think I'll just give it a vertical velocity. So let's say 0.1 here. And so now when I do that, I want to come down here, and the same thing I'm doing here, I want to say this dot velocity, I'm going to add to velocity acceleration. So let's see what that does. So I'm adding acceleration to velocity, and then I add velocity to location. And so now when I run this again, these guys are all going to fall down. Okay. Now what would be nice is if I got them bouncing off the walls. And so to do that, I'm going to come through, every time I come into this guy, I'm going to check and see that they're bouncing. So I'm going to go ahead and create another method, this dot update. No, sorry, I've already got this update. This dot check edges. There we go. So this dot check edges is going to be another method. I'm going to put that right up here. I'm going to say check edges. And so I want to know, when does my ball touch a wall? And so I'll do that with a simple if statement, and I'll say if it does touch the wall, and so that's when, let's say this dot loc is less than 0, then I'm sorry, this dot loc dot x is less than 0. So if this location goes less than 0, that means it's moving past the left wall. And so what I'll do is I will simply change the speed of the velocity. So I'll say this dot vel dot x is equal to negative this dot vel dot x. And actually there's two things that I want to consider. One is that if it's moving past the left side of the screen, I want to change its velocity, but I also want to change, and I'm just changing the x because the left and right wall are only affecting the x velocity. So I'll say, or if this dot loc dot x is greater than, let's say, tower game dot width. Oh, sorry, tower game dot canvas dot width. Okay, so let's see if that works well for us. That looks right. Okay, let's go ahead and run this again and see what happens. If I run this, it's kind of hard to see because none of them are hitting the side. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the same thing for the y direction. I'll come in here and I'll say, I'll put a semicolon there and a semicolon there. And so I'll say if the y is less than 0 or the y is greater than the height, then I want to change the y value, or the y component of the velocity vector. In any case, let's go ahead and run this again and see what happens. So now they're going to go ahead and they're going to bounce, yay, and they're going to bounce off the sides, yay. Okay, that's all working. Looks like some are getting stuck down here. I'll worry about that later, but right now that does it. And so we can see that the amount that they're bouncing is determined largely by this guy. Let's go ahead and cut that down by half. So the force, the downward force, that's a positive number, but remember when y is positive, that's moving down. So if I run this guy again, they should be bouncing up higher because I've increased the gravity force, the force moving it down. Pretty cool. It's working. I think I'll change that even more, make it 0.1. So I've dropped it down a whole bunch now. Now it's probably not going to be enough gravity. See, they're moving up. They're bouncing up. I think that gravity is not strong enough. So let's shoot for something kind of in the middle. Let's say 0.25. And let's see if that makes a little bit more gravity. So you can say they're falling down, bouncing up, but the gravity's pulling them back down. As they move up, they slow down until they turn around, and then they fall back down. Okay. All right, good. I think one other thing I'll do is I'll change the, let's see, the x velocity. So this is the x velocity. I think I'll make that 2 and minus 1. So it's going to have a much weaker velocity moving from side to side. So now they're kind of bouncing more vertically. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's doing it. We've got these guys moving, so that was our goal. One other little change I'd like to make, I think it would be prettier if we used colors. So let's do that. Let's go ahead, instead of just making these guys all white, let's go ahead and put different colors in. And so I'm going to create another, I'm going to say this dot colors, and I'll abbreviate that. And that's going to be an array. And so inside this array, I'm going to put different colors. So I can take this kind of value here, and I can give it different values. So let's go ahead and put in some more. So let's see, I've got this guy. I think I'll line these guys up a little bit better. So I'm going to have different RGBA values for colors. I'm packing them all into an array. And I just have to give these guys different colors now. And I can choose different colors from this array. Okay, so how do I do that? I guess the easiest way would be to go to the RGB Color Picker. So just Google it. If I do RGB Color Picker, website will come up and you can choose different colors. I'm just going to choose different colors from here, and you get an RGB value here. Oh, this is RGB. I'm going to have to put in the A myself. But let's go ahead and take that color. I'm going to put that guy in here. Oh, actually, let's just grab the numbers. Okay, that's what I did. So just grab those first three numbers there, copy that. I'm going to go ahead and paste that guy in for these three numbers. Good. So that's going to be a blue color. Let's grab a few more. Just move the slider over. I'll grab a green color, and I'll copy these values. Whoops. 25, 209, 28. I'm going to put those guys in here. Let's grab a couple more. $209.61, so it's got a lot of red, just a little bit of green, a little bit of blue. I'm going to plug those guys in here. And I'll do this 2 more times. Let's choose a purple color. 160.25.209. Great. And I'll do one more. And let's choose a yellow color. 209.199.23. Okay, so now I've got some different colors to choose from, and I'm going to choose a color from this array. And so to do that, I'm going to go ahead and say, let's say this dot colors, and I'm going to choose one of the values in here. And to choose that, I'll choose it randomly. So I'm going to say, see, it's got to be an integer, so I'll say math.floor, and I'll choose math.random, and I'm going to multiply that by this dot colors dot length. So now I'm going to be choosing, let's see, floor, is that all, my parentheses all matching here? That looks right, that looks right, that looks good. And so this dot color, I'm going to take down here in the render function, And I've got this dot color. Let's see if that does it. That looked right to me. So come back over here and reload it. And so now I've got an error. So let's see what I've got. Towers, no, that's not right. Math is not defined. Looks like I used a lowercase m. So let's see, math here, that looks right. Uppercase math here. And so let's try and see if that does it. And there they go. Oh, look at the pretty colors. Okay, so that's looking good. And so these guys are all bouncing and they're moving around. And I think that's going to do it. The one thing I do want to change, some of these guys are getting stuck. I'll worry about that later. But right now, let's add one more thing over here. If I go back to my game class and I look at the render method, notice that when I render, I have this got context, clear rect. And so this is rewriting the background color every time. If I comment that out, then I won't redraw them. And so what's going to happen now is I'll get, okay. So I can see that they're not getting overwritten. I get their trails. So I'm not redoing the black background every time. And so I can kind of see and follow how these movements change. So you guys can play around with that, but I'll go ahead and take that out for now and come back over here, and if I run it again, now they're just going to run without trails, and that's looking pretty good. Okay, I think I'm going to stop this video here. That accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, and that's it for tonight. Bye.